Let's make this super easy, beginner-friendly scarf. This is a pattern that is great for men, women, anyone. You can make it wider or skinnier based on what you want and how much yarn you have. This one is beginner-friendly because it only uses one stitch. It is a very thick pattern, so we're going to use a hook size that's bigger than what we would normally use for this type of yarn, and you can see it is very stretchy. So let's get into it. To make this scarf, you'll need a few supplies. I'm going to use 2 balls of this wool spun. Now, this is limited time yarn, so you may not be able to find it everywhere, but any size 5 bulky yarn and an 11.5 millimeter pea-size hook will work. You'll also want to have a yarn needle because you'll need at least 2 of these, so you'll need to weave in the join, and of course scissors. So let's get started. We're going to start by tying a slip knot. If you're not sure how to do that, let me know in the comments and I'll do a video on it. You are going to make a really long chain. So the chain that you start with is going to be the length that you want the scarf to finish. So mine is about 150 chains. Now I'm not going to ask you to watch me do 150 chains, and I'll go ahead and go slow. So in order to do a chain, you put your slip knot on your hook. You're going to bring your hook down with the nose up, go over the nose, and then I like to turn my hook down, create some space here by pulling on that knot and slide through. So that's how you chain. If you've never done it before, definitely just practice chaining. So I did 150 chains, and I'm doing them a little tight because slip stitches tend to be on the tight side. So if you do your starting chain a little bit loose, it will ruffle on the edge. So that's as far as I'm gonna go for the purposes of this video, but your starting chain, again, will need to be that full 150 chains, or if you don't feel like counting, around 8 feet. I'm going to skip that first loop right there and work into the second. So this is going to be slip stitches. The rest of the entire scarf will repeat the same thing. So insert your hook into that first space, yarn over, and I leave my nose down for that. Pull it up a loop, and here's where you could get into some trouble. If you are too tight here, your whole scarf would be really difficult to work with. You want to make sure you pull that all the way up so that you have some space here. Turn your nose back down and slip stitch. So we're going to just keep on doing slip stitches. So insert your hook into that next space, grab your yarn, pull up a loop nice and tall, making sure that we have plenty of space to work through and it doesn't start to get tight. Your hands will cramp, you will curse my name, you will hate my guts if you make this a bunch of really tight stitches. So keep working that all the way down your 150. I know I only have about 10 here, but you'll have a nice, really long string to work down. So again, making sure we're keeping that nice and loose. So you would pause the video here. I'm just getting to the end, so make sure you work your slip stitches all the way down. You're gonna see these little V's sitting kind of facing up. They shouldn't be on the top of your work. They should be kind of facing forward. I'll work into this last stitch right here. Pull up my loop nice and tall still and finish that. We will chain 1, and because these are really short stitches, you've got to pull your chain 1 tight so that your edges don't end up being wider than your actual scarf. So you're going to pull that tight. Normally you don't do that in any other project, but you want to do that here. Then you'll go ahead and turn your work. Now there's a tricky part to this to be able to see where you're working into. It does kind of look like our little V's are right here. They aren't. Remembering that our V's were facing forward when we were working on the other side, this is where we are wanting to work. The rest of the scarf, you're going to work into the back loop of that V. So that, because we turned our work, is hiding all the way on the other side. If you work into this stitch, which can kind of look like the back loop, you will end up with a different texture. It'll look great still, but it's just going to look different than what we're doing today. So just make sure you turn it over a little bit, find that first loop. It might look like it's this one, but that's our chain that we just did. So it's going to be right here. Insert your hook, grab your yarn, pull up a loop, and nice loose slip stitch. So again, we're turning it and finding it on the back side. So you're going to do that all the way down, and it's this working all the way across into this back loop that starts to create that almost knit-like look. So if you're a knitter, this kind of to me looks like brioche knitting. If you've ever done that, I love the way that looks. It's so nice and thick and squishy. So this is very, very similar in a crochet technique. So work that all the way down, and again, you'll probably want to pause here so that you can finish your 150 because I'm only working a short amount. So now I've gotten to the end, and this would be a good time to use stitch markers. If you haven't ever used those before, you would want to put them in the ends. So I'll show you what I mean here. So this is the very last stitch. It's really kind of hard to tell. I'm going to put, if I can get it in there, my last slip stitch there, and you can see from where we started over here, it looks fine right now, but it's going to get harder to see as we go. So what I would do is put a slip stitch, or a stitch marker right here on this little space. So pull up one, tighten that, and see this is where we're starting. So I'm going to go slip stitch on the back, and then right here is where you'd want to put that stitch marker. So you put it right here, that way you're going to see it when you come back the other way. I should demonstrate that, but I don't know where my stitch markers are. That is a very classic problem that I have, is I never use stitch markers because I don't know where I put them. So yeah, put that in the comments if you can relate. So again, we're just turning it over and working on the back loop. So that is going to continue to repeat for the entire width of the scarf, which I will show you the finished scarf in a little more detail here in just a moment, and I'll show you what it looks like on. So here is our last stitch again, working in that back loop, chain up one, tighten your chain, and turn your work. So I'll do a couple more rows. It's a very relaxing project to make because it's very repetitive. This is one that you're going to be able to binge watch a show. I'm actually watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine right now. I've never seen it. It's hilarious. So once we get probably the fifth or sixth row, you'll really start to be able to see that texture. This pattern is, like I mentioned in the beginning, great for men or women, young or old. This is a really versatile pattern that you can use for gift giving or for yourself. So now we can see I've done a few rows, and you can see that it's got those lines and it's got them on both sides. So if you are doing this too tight, this will be a nightmare to work with. You'll have a very hard time getting into those stitches. So just remember to try to keep a very relaxed hand. Make sure that it's nice and squishy, and pulling. If you do it too tight, you will leave me a nasty comment, I promise. Now I want to show you how to tie in your second ball of yarn. So this is where my scarf is after the first ball, and this is the full scarf. So you can see there's a lot more to this one. So now we have this tail left over, and I like to err on the side of leaving a really long tail. Helps me weave in the ends. So I want to bring in my second ball of yarn. I will pull all of the yarn barf out of the middle that I managed to pull out this time, and bring this into the picture. So I want to continue to crochet with this like it's just part of the same thing. So I'm finishing up with the end of the first one, and then I would just drop that, put that next to it, and keep working like I'm already using the new ball. So we'll worry about tying the ends off after. So I'll do a couple of stitches just to make sure my tension is going to be right. And what I typically do in every project is just keep on going and wait till the end to weave in the ends, and then I'm really mad at myself. I'm not going to do that this time. So we'll go ahead and flip it over, and you can see the two ends are here. I like to tie just a regular knot. So I'll do the first one. You don't want to tie it so tight that it pulls on the stitches on the other side. So you want it to be tight enough that it'll stay, but not too tight that it'll mess up your garment. And then I will tie it the second time. So we're going to double knot it. We're going to pull that as tight as we feel like we can without ripping the yarn. And then you'll want to have a yarn needle. These are a lifesaver when it comes to weaving in the ends. I prefer metal ones too. So I'm going to shove the yarn through there, and then I'm going to weave in the end. So for weaving in an end, I like to work one direction, work across the garment or the stitches, and then come back the other way. That way, as it moves and stretches, it's weaved in multiple directions. So for this one, I'll probably just start working this direction. I'm going to go through the middle of all of these. Doesn't have to be perfect. And pull that through, and then I'll probably head on down through the middle of the stitches. Make sure it's hidden underneath inside of all of these. Come out into the next row. And again, I don't want to pull this too tight because this will need to be able to move and stretch. And then I'll work it a little bit this direction. And that's it. So I'll do that with all of my ends, make sure it's laid nice and flat, but again, not pulled tight, so you can't really see that it's weaved in there. So I'll do that with the other one too, and then I will finish the scarf. It'll be just about twice as wide as this is, because I've got one worked already. I'm going to go ahead and tell on myself. I mentioned using stitch markers and how important that is. You can see here that I did not. It's very clear. Step down right there. So that's what happens if you maybe don't know exactly where your end is. It can happen to anybody. I didn't notice till I was editing the video. So it's a pretty forgiving scarf. So if you see your ends looking jagged, it's because you're probably missing a stitch at the end. My other end is perfect because, well, it doesn't look like it because I've been pulling on it, but this end is nice and flat, and that's because I didn't miss any over here. And you can see that I very clearly did right there. So we all do it. Use stitch markers, folks.